Hello and welcome to a special edition of Film Club. I haven't done a Film Club episode in probably almost a month here, but this is a very special one. This is a review of Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, which I got to see last evening, and I have to tell you right off the bat before I start this review, this whole thing is going to be spoilering the entire movie. I'm actually even going to put it in the description and in the actual video title itself. This will be a spoiler review. I am going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so if you don't want to know anything about this movie and go in, what I will tell you is that at the end of the day, it's still a Star Wars movie. It is still Episode 8, and it is... they're not going to remake Episode 8, so this is your Episode 8. You should go see it, go support it, whatever. But at the end of the day, you should go see it. If you don't want to know anything else about this movie, go watch the movie, then come back, watch this video review, because I cannot talk about this movie without spoiling the major beats on it. So the other caveat to this review is normally with Film Club, I usually do a thumbs up or a thumbs down kind of grading scale for Film Club, because my opinion on this movie is going to probably be controversial. For this movie in particular, and this review in particular, I'm going to be giving it a letter grade like I do with all of my video game reviews. The reason for this is I feel like I can better convey my overall thoughts and put a letter grade on this movie. And this might be something I do going forward with Film Club as well. I haven't decided yet, but for Star Wars The Last Jedi, I have to give it a letter grade instead of the thumbs up or thumbs down, because it just won't work that way. So, anyways, guys, let's dive into The Last Jedi. Final warning, spoilers ahead. What did I think about The Last Jedi walking out of it? This is easily the most hyped of any of these Star Wars movies. I think this one was more hyped than Episode 7, but maybe Episode 7 was because it was the first Star Wars movie in 10 years. I don't know. However, I feel this one was the most hyped, and I'm going to be honest, I liked it a lot. I enjoyed some aspects of it, some parts of it. I didn't love The Last Jedi. I wanted to love The Last Jedi, but there's just too many flaws in this movie for me to say it is a great Star Wars movie that can stand up with the classics like Episodes 4, 5, and 6. And while I wasn't as disappointed in it as, say, maybe Rogue One, and this movie definitely is not The Empire Strikes Back again, kind of like Force Awakens was A New Hope again. It just, they do some things that really irk me, and it comes off to me as sloppy storytelling, sloppy writing, and just overall a confusion of what the good and the bad side of this storyline is, and that is my major problem coming out of The Last Jedi. So, first thing I have to talk about, because it's a major beat in this movie, it's a major thing that happens in this movie, and it is a catalyst for the rest of the events in this movie. So, I'm going to go ahead and kind of just go through beat by beat parts of the movie to get to this point, because it will make sense. So just go along with me as I kind of go through. So the movie opens up in a fantastic way. Probably one of the best parts of the movie is the opening. I thought that opening battle with Poe Dameron kind of just doing his own solo thing and going out there and essentially tricking the First Order into paying attention to him so they could set up that whole bombing raid thing was awesome. I really, really enjoyed that. The humor in this movie was on point. Probably, I'd say about 95% of the time. Pretty much every joke fired without really any misfires in this movie, and I thought that was good. And Poe Dameron, I still think, out of all of these new characters in this trilogy, is the best. He's my personal favorite, and he did an outstanding job. Once again, Oscar Isaac, amazing actor. He was great in this movie. The opening was great. I enjoyed every aspect of that. And then we finally got back to Rey meeting Luke Skywalker for the first time, and we got the answer to that scene where Force Awakens ended, where she's handing him the lightsaber, and his first response is to just grab the lightsaber and just throw it behind him off the mountain and walk away. I thought it was great. It made perfect sense to me. This is a grizzled and old Luke Skywalker. Another thing I did really actually love about this movie was Mark Hamill returning to that character for what could be possibly a final time, and we'll get to that later in this video review, but he did such an outstanding job playing Luke Skywalker again. playing a character that is tormented by some decisions he made in the past, and we'll get to that as well. But he did such an outstanding job. I have to give credit where credit's due, and he was one of the best parts of this movie. That was a great part of this movie. Really enjoyed every scene that he was in. So obviously they have their, you know, ins and outs here. Rey wants to be trained as a Jedi. Luke is hesitant. Obviously he has his reasons. He totally has his reasons, and he kind of gives her an abridged version of his reasons why. And then Kylo Ren starts to try to turn Rey to the dark side while Rey is trying to turn Kylo Ren to the good side. They have this weird link between each other, and this is where I started to have problems with this movie. This is where the flaws started to show for me. So Rey and Kylo Ren have some sort of force link between each other, kind of like Leia and Luke did in the original trilogy. However, Rey and Kylo Ren still, up to this point, not getting to episode 9 because that's not out yet, are not biologically connected whatsoever, and it becomes apparent later in the movie that Supreme Leader Snoke says he manipulated all this stuff and everything. We'll get to that because that's a major problem with this movie, but it led to some really interesting but kind of awkward scenes at the same time. So in the older Star Wars trilogies, they would have these scenes where they could kind of talk to each other through their minds, through the Force. And in this movie, they took it a step farther by actually allowing them to be kind of in the same room while they're conversing with each other. And that part of the movie started to bother me just a little bit, because if that's a thing we're going to start throwing out in the 8th installment in a franchise, why wasn't this a thing before? Like, I know maybe the technology wasn't there to do something like this, but why wasn't this there before? Like, when did they all of a sudden, people that have Force powers, discover this power of, you know, kind of teleporting their spirit somewhere else? That's a problem I had in this movie. I'm sure somebody's going to fire off in the comments below, well, it was written in this book and blah, blah, blah. And that's a problem I have, and we'll get to that. But that was a problem I had in this movie, and that leads to a bigger problem in this movie, which we're getting to. So there's that's ongoing. You have the whole situation with Poe Dameron, and he's trying to do this with the First Order, and then something happens to Leia where she's kind of put in a coma for half the movie, and they bring in Laura Dern's character, who is Admiral Holdo. She's a fine character, but incredibly underdeveloped. Like, the problem there, again, there's an interesting character, incredibly underdeveloped. Like, I don't know who she is, what her backstory is, where she came from, why she's all of a sudden in charge. They didn't explain any of that. It was just, hey, here's this lady with purple hair. She's in charge now because Leia's in a coma. Cool. You know, good talking to you, bro. I don't know. That was something I had an issue with. And then one of the biggest flaws in this entire movie is there's an entire subplot that revolves around character of Finn and this new character named Rose, who's a very interesting character, but the plot she's involved in is so weak because it just doesn't matter in the end, which we'll get to. And there's this whole subplot with, well, basically what they've discovered in this movie is that the First Order has the ability to track ships through hyperspace. This is a new thing for Star Wars. And they have to disable this, or they're not going to be able to get their fleet away from the First Order, because the First Order will just keep following them through space until they inevitably run out of fuel, and that will be the end of the Resistance. This was a fine subplot, except there's one major flaw with it. There is probably, I would say, if you add up the time that this subplot is given throughout the 2.5 hour runtime this movie has, it is pointless at the end, because everything these two characters do in this subplot does not matter at the end, because this Admiral Holdo lady had a backup plan with Leia, and no one else was let in on the backup plan. So everything Finn and Rose and Poe tried to help do with getting this Codebreaker guy, which is a character played by Benicio del Toro, who is actually pretty good, but the character I thought was very interesting. However, their plot doesn't matter, because at the end, they fail that whole thing, and then Admiral Holdo's like, oh, well, I had this plan this whole time. Sorry, I didn't let you in on it. Like, the whole subplot is incredibly pointless to the overall story of this movie, and that's a huge flaw. But that's not the biggest problem I had with The Last Jedi, unfortunately. I wish it was. I really wish it was. And it really pains me to be negative on this movie, because I was incredibly hyped for it. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. And the biggest problem I have with this movie, and this is perhaps the biggest spoiler of this entire review, so warning once again, and that is they did nothing with the character of Snoke. So you get further in the story and Rey decides to tell Luke, hey, I have to leave and I'm going to go and save Kylo Ren. I'm going to bring him to the good side. And he basically says, this isn't going to go the way you think it is. I wouldn't do that, blah, blah, blah. She leaves. She goes and meets Kylo Ren on his ship. He then puts her in handcuffs and he takes her to Supreme Leader Snoke. This is all very much Return of the Jedi-like in those regards. And none of that bothered me. I thought it was a nice homage to it rather than just doing that again. So they're in this room, and it leads to an incredibly cool scene with this Supreme Leader Snoke guy. You have to remember, like, we really haven't been too properly introduced to this character. He was a character that existed in Force Awakens only in hologram form. And here, this is the first time we're seeing this character in the flesh, literally. And there's some pretty cool stuff he does. He has the ability to wave his finger around and just move people at will with the Force. But it's okay because he's dead now. And this is the big flaw with this entire movie. So obviously Kylo Ren is conflicted and he wants to help Rey. And at the end, it's very almost reminiscent of Return of the Jedi. Rey's lightsaber happens to be sitting on the right arm of the chair that Snoke is sitting in. Kylo Ren uses the Force to turn the lightsaber on and cut Snoke in half and kill him. And that's it for that character. He's dead now. And he falls over, he's dead. This leads to them teaming up in probably one of the better lightsaber, team-ups I've seen in any Star Wars movie. Which was really cool and fun to watch. They fought all these, I think they're called Protean guards. I could be wrong. You can fire me off in the comments for that too. But they have a pretty badass fight. And it's decided at the end, she thinks, oh, cool, Kylo Ren has turned to the good side. And he says, no, I want you to join me. And together, we're going to rule the galaxy. And we're going to be in this First Order thing together. And so they have their moment. They turn against each other. And that's that. So now you have... So here's the problems I have. Number one, Supreme Leader Snoke I thought was a very interesting character that had a very almost Emperor Palpatine-like aspect to him. I mean, that's exactly what they were going for with him. And I never got the answers to who he was, why he became as powerful as he is, how in the 30 years between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens he rose to power, and then to just take this character that you're trying to build up as this big bad villain and just kill him in the middle of this movie with literally no consequence, and all to just have Kylo Ren take over the First Order is incredibly weak. Like, why did we even create this character when we just killed him? It makes no freaking sense to me why they killed him. This was a very, very poor story decision on, I guess Rian Johnson, wrote this story. So I don't know why he decided to do this other than maybe shock value, but it doesn't work for the story at all. And that's where the movie has a major flaw. There are some other flaws in the story that I'm more than willing to accept and overlook, especially the whole plot line with, as we talked about, with Finn and Rose and their whole plot line that just doesn't matter. But I cannot overlook this Snoke thing because we were promised a big bad villain in Snoke, and Revelations, we didn't get them. Instead, we just killed that guy, and we're probably never going to know who he is and where he came from, except, of course, I know they're going to write a bunch of books that they're going to expect me to read. But the thing that was nice about the original Star Wars trilogy is that those were 3 complete movies that told 3 complete stories. I didn't have to read a bunch of other literature. I totally did as a kid because I love Star Wars and I love that extended universe that no longer matters because they threw it out. However, I don't want to have to read a backstory in a book or a comic book about Supreme Leader Snoke. I should have been given that information in one of these 3 movies, and they didn't do that. Instead, they just killed him. And that's a huge fault of this movie. And it's something I just literally cannot let go. And because of that, that knocks this movie down for me, unfortunately. There are some other good moments after that. It does kind of all end up on a end note where it's kind of a battle like the Battle of Hoth, but it is different enough that it isn't that, and that's fine. There is a scene between Luke Skywalker and Kylo Ren. It is also revealed who Rey's parents are, and dear Lord, that... man. So Rey's parents are, instead of this big, she's been wondering who her parents are. She's been searching for this answer throughout Force Awakens, throughout half of this movie. And then it is just revealed to her through kind of almost an offhanded comment by Kylo Ren of, your parents were nothing, they were junk traders that traded you away for booze. Literally, that's what it is. Those are her parents. She's not special, she doesn't come from anything, she just happens to be an orphan that has these Force powers. Now I understand, I get the idea behind this. They're trying to make this story where, hey, you can come from nothing and still be something. I get it, and that's fine. That's a happy-go-lucky feeling that everybody can get behind, and I get it, but I wanted something more. And the fact that we're just not going to get that, and it just is a happenstance that she has all these Force powers, to me is disappointing. So that was a bummer. I'm talking about a lot of bummers. So the movie ends with a gigantic battle on this remote planet that is very much like Hoth, but not Hoth. They even have to legitimately have a scene in which a person literally touches this ground, tastes like the snow-like substance, and says, oh, it's salt. Like, they had to put that 2-second scene in this movie just to remind you, hey, this is an Empire, guys. I thought that was a little ridiculous, but whatever. So the end of this movie is pretty decent, actually. I wasn't so put down by how this movie's like climatic battle went, in a sense of finally getting to see Luke Skywalker essentially have one last cool moment before his death. And yes, unfortunately, again, this whole thing is spoilers, but he's dead. Does that mean he's not going to be in Episode 9? Absolutely not. You know, he's going to show up as a ghost form, kind of like Yoda and Obi-Wan and all that. Absolutely, they're totally going to do that. But he's dead in this timeline, and he used kind of the last of his Force powers to project himself into this battle on this planet. And the planet's name escapes me, I apologize, but it's a cool sequence. I really enjoyed it. Again, one of my biggest problems is this whole idea of Force projection, where these Jedi are now apparently able to Force project themselves into different areas of the galaxy. Like, that wasn't really a thing in other Star Wars movies, but here in the 8th installment, all of a sudden, it's a thing, and it's not really explained, it just happens. I don't know, man. Like, as someone who's watched those original 3 Star Wars movies, 4, 5, and 6, more times than I probably care to share as a kid, just to get to Episode 8 and like thematically undo the entire premise of everything that's come before it to fit this storyline and to make it more modern day appropriate, I guess, is a little ridiculous. And that's probably my biggest problem with The Last Jedi, is I feel like Rian Johnson decided to sit down and literally rewrite history with Star Wars in Episode 8. And I'm not a fan of that, and it kind of pisses me off a little bit, if we're going to be honest. At the end of the day, it's still a Star Wars movie. Still enjoyed it. I still think it is worth watching. And, like it or hate it, it is part of the franchise saga. Even those first 3 movies that I don't really care for that much are part of this franchise. They are actually referenced in this movie in, I would say, not a terrible way, which is good, but I mean, man, like, I plan on seeing this at least one more time while it's in theaters, because I want to be for sure definitive on my answer on, do I think this is a good Star Wars movie or not? And right now my answer for this, and this is why I'm giving this a letter grade and not a thumbs up or thumbs down, is I'm giving it a C+. I know that seems low. I really hate to say a C+. It pains me to say the words C+ when associated with something Star Wars related, especially a Star Wars movie. And in a year where I was expecting to get a really good Battlefront campaign and that game was a letdown, that makes this even more of a letdown for me, because I'm a huge Star Wars fan and I wanted to get my Star Wars fix. And I felt like when I walked out of The Last Jedi, I didn't get that completely. So, the movie ends in an interesting way, to the point where I just literally don't know what Episode 9 is going to be. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but there are some really good things in there. It was great to see the late, great Carrie Fisher one last time in the role that made her a star. I really enjoyed all her scenes in the movie. Again, I felt like they underused BB-8 in this movie. along with C-3PO and R2-D2. R2-D2's in like maybe 2 scenes of this movie, but they're used very effectively, and that's good. There is also one other returning character from older Star Wars movies. I'm not going to spoil who it is. They're done in an incredible CG fashion. It didn't bother me. I actually thought it was one of the better scenes in the movie. Other people had problems with it. That was something I surprisingly didn't have a problem with in this movie, but overall, Star Wars The Last Jedi, unfortunately I have to give it a C+. I still think it's worth your time to go watch it. Go form your own opinion, you know. I feel like more than any other Star Wars movie, this is one that's going to divide the fans. You know, I've been following all day the Rotten Tomatoes score versus the audience score, where the critics gave this movie like a 94% at the time of this recording, and the audience score is at like a 56%. And there are a lot of Star Wars fans like me that were disappointed in this movie. Some fans hate this movie. I've seen some fans calling this the worst Star Wars movie, worse than not only the prequel trilogy, but also worse than the Star Wars Holiday Special. I don't think it's that bad. I think that's a little extreme, but I think it's a good movie. It's just not the great movie that I wanted to walk out loving and watching it over and over again. And that's unfortunate because it has Star Wars attached to the name. So, C+ for Star Wars The Last Jedi. I also waited to make my top 5 favorite films of the year list because I was for sure thinking that Star Wars was going to be on that list, and it's not now, and that's unfortunate. So that video will be forthcoming. So anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video review. I hope you're not too mad that I spoiled the shit out of Star Wars, but I warned you about 80 times in this video. So anyways, guys, remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and as always, until next time.